YouTube is now the biggest podcasting platform in the world, and here's everything you need to know to get started with YouTube podcasting and take advantage of all the new features. You can actually get started with a YouTube podcast by using the create button, clicking on that and going to create a podcast. You have a couple of options here. You can actually make a new podcast playlist. You can start designating videos to go into that, or you can actually convert an existing playlist into a podcast and give it YouTube's new podcast features. However, your content has to be eligible, and you have to make sure that every piece of content that's in this podcast playlist is abiding by the YouTube community guidelines. You're going to get a lot of new features, including dedicated podcast analytics for the videos that are in these playlists, and you're going to be highlighted potentially on YouTube's podcast spotlight page, depending on what category your podcast falls into and how popular it becomes. Eligible podcasts will also be featured in YouTube Music, and I'm actually sure we are going to be getting some new features around RSS feeds soon, but YouTube hasn't fully updated us on that just yet. But when they do, we'll make sure we update you here on the StreamYard channel. In terms of what videos you can turn into podcast episodes, they should actually function as full podcast episodes rather than clips or YouTube shorts when they're in these playlists. These can be recorded YouTube videos. They also could be premieres, or they can be live streams. Designating these episodes as podcast does give them some increased discoverability in YouTube, and audio versions of them will be available in YouTube Music. The analytics that are specific to your podcast can be found in your creator dashboard in YouTube Studio, but you also will be able to see the specific analytics around the content for your channel and how it's being discovered when it comes specifically to these podcasts. You also will have a podcast tab on your YouTube channel page, similar to how you have a tab for live streams, shorts, and videos. You'll also have that for podcast as well. And so everything will be separated cleanly, and you'll be able to understand where the traffic is coming from. In terms of best practices, even if you have a podcast with multiple seasons, you shouldn't make different podcast playlists for those. If you want to make regular playlists for them on your YouTube channel, that's perfectly fine. But as far as the podcast itself, each of those individual seasons should just be in one single podcast playlist. When you're creating a new podcast and you're using these podcast playlists, you're going to need to give it a title and description just like you normally would. However, for the podcast, you're also going to create podcast art for this, and it's going to serve as a podcast thumbnail. This is also sometimes called a podcast art cover. Now, the difference between this and a regular YouTube thumbnail is it is going to be a 1-to-1 aspect ratio, which basically means it's going to need to be a square. So instead of a 1920 by 1080 rectangle that would be a normal YouTube channel thumbnail, or a 16 by 19 aspect ratio, it's going to be a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. For best practices, I would say probably make this 1000 by 1000 pixels. Now, I know a question a lot of you are going to have is, well, what about monetization, Roberto? If you're in the YouTube Partner Program and your channel is already monetized, then your podcasts are eligible for all of the regular YouTube monetization. This includes ad revenue, YouTube Premium revenue, and you also, of course, will have all the fan funding features like super chats, super stickers if it's a live stream, super thanks if it's a replay, and of course, channel memberships with the join button. And of course, you can feel free to get your own sponsors and include sponsored ad read spots in your podcast, just like you would with any other YouTube video that you want sponsored. YouTube has announced that they are going to have more podcast features to come, including RSS feeds, but we don't know how all of that is going to play out or what it's going to look like. We will make sure to update you here on the StreamYard channel with those new updates around YouTube podcast. In the meantime, if you have any questions, leave those in the comment section. I will be answering as many of them as I can. If you're looking to take your live streams to the next level, make sure you're checking out the other video here on the screen or in the description down below. Stay awesome, and I'll catch you next time.